Okay, so you're trying to make sense of this ongoing conflict, right? Cut through all the noise and just get the essential information
Yeah,
fast.
there's so much out there.
Exactly. So today we've pulled together some really different sources. We've got a reporter's reflections, very personal from years covering the war.
Right.
Then there's a pretty strong opinion piece about, what actually caused it.
A very different angle.
Totally.
Yeah.
And finally, a detailed geopolitical take on how it might end, or at least how one perspective thinks it should end, focusing on the map, basically.
hmm
Our mission here is just to lay out these key ideas, these different viewpoints, so you get a clearer picture without getting totally overwhelmed.
Well, starting with that reporter's piece, what immediately hits you is the human side of it all.
Yeah.
They spent 3 years covering what they flat out call a needless war.
Mm.
You can feel the weight of that.
The disruption.
Huge disruption. And this feeling of trying to understand why, you know, searching for these, quote, invisible powers,
Yeah.
driving things. It's that very human search for meaning when things feel chaotic.
It is. And they draw this parallel, which I found interesting, to the lead up to World War One.
Ah, yes. The idea that some people were questioning things, asking, why are we heading this way?
Right, while others were maybe more passive, just going along.
Yeah, and the reporter's goal seems to be about finding those patterns, those undercurrents,
Yeah.
and sharing them so others can question things too.
It's a powerful perspective. But then you switch gears to this other viewpoint, and it's quite a clash.
It really is.
This argument basically says that anyone claiming Putin or Russia had no reason to react to NATO expanding eastward is, well, it uses strong language, ignorant and dangerous.
It completely rejects what it calls that sort of childish black and white worldview.
Uh-huh. It insists you have to look at the complex geopolitics involved. It wasn't just out of the blue, according to this source.
Exactly. This view frames NATO's expansion not as just, countries choosing alliances, but as a direct push into what Russia considers its vital security zone.
It's sphere of influence, essentially.
Precisely. So, while the invasion itself is condemned by many, this perspective says, look, it was a response, maybe a drastic one, sure, but a response to perceived threats building up right on its doorstep.
It forces you to consider how different sides can see the exact same events through completely different lenses of history and security, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Which leads us kind of neatly into the third piece, the one focused on the geopolitical endgame,
Yeah.
particularly the Black Sea.
Right. This one makes a really bold claim that Ukraine holding on to Black Sea access is, historically speaking, questionable.
Yeah, it argues that coastline, including Odessa, pointing out it was founded by Catherine the Great, is historically Russian territory.
So from this viewpoint, Ukrainian control there is seen almost as an anomaly, a result of Soviet-era decisions, not deep history.
And that's key, this idea of undoing what it calls gifts from the Soviet period. It mentions border changes under Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev.
Citing Crimea specifically.
Right, as an example of a politically motivated transfer, not something organic. It challenges the legitimacy of the current borders based on these historical claims. It's saying these borders are artificial.
And it goes even further, suggesting that a Ukrainian port on the Black Sea, well, it's just not sustainable in the long run, given Russia's historical naval dominance there.
Yeah, the argument is basically that allowing what it terms an anti-Russian regime to control that strategic access, it's just not a scenario Russia would ever accept long term.
So what's the proposed solution then from this very specific perspective?
It involves redrawing the map significantly. The Dnieper River is put forward as a more, let's say, natural or defensible border,
Uh-huh.
possibly with some kind of buffer zone as well.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it mentions creating a land corridor to Transnistria.
For security.
Yeah.
And I suppose influence.
Both, it seems, for security, logistics, and extending that geopolitical reach.
And the conclusion the source draws is pretty stark.
Very. It says the only way to get lasting peace is through a solution based on these, quote, historically rooted realities. Everything else, just a temporary fix, doomed to fail because it ignores these deeper historical and geographical factors as they see them.
So quite a range of views we've covered.
Definitely. You've got the human cost, very immediate and personal. Then the geopolitical argument focusing on NATO and security fears as the trigger.
And finally, this historical territorial argument demanding essentially a redrawing of borders based on claims about the past.
Each provides a really different lens on the conflict.
Okay, so we've laid out these contrasting takes. The personal impact, the security-based justification, the historical argument for changing borders. Now, thinking about all this, what underlying assumptions about history, about security, about national identity, What assumptions do you think are driving these different interpretations?
That's the real question, isn't it? What are the foundational beliefs shaping how each side sees the problem and the solution?
And circling back to that reporter's thought about invisible powers, what unseen forces might still be at play, shaping events no matter what agreements are reached on paper? Something for you to definitely mull over.